They thought their authority was enough to keep me locked in a cage. Wrong move. What started with handcuffs and a crowd recording on their phones ended with their egos shattered into pieces. Curious how it all flipped? Stay tuned. It was one of those mornings when the sun seemed to be in an unusually good mood, shining just a little brighter over downtown Chicago. Marcus Lawson stood at the corner of Monroe Street, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored navy blue suit. At 35, with a neatly trimmed beard and the kind of confidence that came from being the state attorney general, Marcus was used to people noticing him. But today, the attention wasn't the good kind. He glanced at his phone. His Uber was running late, because of course it was. Between back-to-back meetings and a court appearance, Marcus barely had time to breathe. He sighed, mentally rehearsing his pitch for the upcoming meeting, but just as he pocketed his phone, two uniformed cops approached. The younger one, Officer Bradley Harper, had that too eager to prove himself look. Tall, blonde, and radiating the kind of energy that said, "I woke up today looking for trouble." The older one, Officer Robert Taylor, had a more composed demeanor, but his sharp eyes didn't miss a thing. "Hey there," Harper started, squinting at Marcus like he'd caught him red-handed doing absolutely nothing. "What are you up to?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, his voice calm but firm. "Waiting for my ride. Is there an issue, officer?" Harper crossed his arms, his lips curling into a smirk. "Your ride, huh? Or are you just observing the neighborhood?" The way he said it dripped with condescension, as if Marcus standing on a public sidewalk in a suit was the most suspicious thing imaginable. "I'm sorry, but I have an important meeting to get to. Is there a problem here?" Marcus kept his tone steady, but internally he was already annoyed. He'd seen this play out before, just not usually in a three-piece suit. Taylor, trying to ease the tension, stepped forward. "Just a routine check, sir. Mind showing some ID?" Marcus, always the professional, reached into his pocket slowly and handed over his driver's license. He watched Harper's eyes linger on his wrist. "Nice watch," Harper remarked, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Kinda fancy for someone just standing around." Marcus fought the urge to roll his eyes. "Is there something I can help you with, officer?" But Harper wasn't done. "You know, Rob, something feels off here. I think we need to take a closer look, maybe check his belongings." "Officer, this is unnecessary," Marcus said sharply, his irritation finally peeking through. But Harper ignored him, stepping closer. Without warning, he grabbed Marcus's arm. "Sir, we have reason to believe you might be up to something," Harper announced loudly, as if speaking to an invisible jury. Marcus clenched his jaw, willing himself to stay composed. A crowd had started to gather, curious onlookers pulling out their phones to record the scene. The last thing Marcus needed was to lose his cool and become part of some viral video. "Everything all right?" someone called from the small group of spectators. "Step back!" Harper barked, his voice echoing off the buildings. Taylor, clearly sensing the situation spiraling, tried to intervene. "Hey, Harper, maybe we should..." But it was too late. Harper had already pulled out a pair of handcuffs and slapped them onto Marcus's wrists. The crowd gasped. Marcus, his pulse steady despite the chaos, looked Harper dead in the eye and said, "You're making a mistake." But Harper didn't flinch. "We'll see about that," he said, his smirk widening. Taylor looked increasingly uneasy as Marcus was led toward the squad car. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and the phone stayed pointed. Marcus could feel the weight of their stares, but he kept his head high. Inside, though, a storm was brewing. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was calculating. Because if there was one thing he knew for certain, it was this: he didn't lose battles. Not in court, and definitely not on the streets. The fluorescent lights in the holding room buzzed faintly, adding to the already suffocating tension. Marcus Lawson sat stiffly on the cold metal bench, his tailored suit looking wildly out of place against the drab gray walls of the police station. His calm demeanor hadn't cracked, not yet, but the intensity in his gaze spoke volumes. He was watching, calculating. On the other side of the bars, Officer Bradley Harper paced like a man on a mission. You could almost see the imaginary badge of glory he'd pinned on himself. "All right, let's run his name through the system," Harper declared, sounding like a character from an over-the-top cop show. Bet you he's got ties to some gang or shady business. Officer Robert Taylor, leaning against a desk nearby, folded his arms and sighed. His face betrayed a mix of doubt and regret. Brad, look at him. He's way too polished for any of that. I mean, those shoes probably cost more than my car. Harper spun around dramatically. Exactly. That's how they get away with it, looking all respectable. It's a front. He gestured wildly toward Marcus, as if the mere sight of his Rolex was damning evidence. You've seen the watch, Rob. People don't wear stuff like that unless they're hiding something. Marcus, who had been sitting in silence up to this point, finally spoke. His voice was calm but carried a razor-sharp edge. Officers, let me save you some trouble. You're making a very big mistake. I'm invoking my right to contact an attorney. Harper snorted, waving him off like he'd heard it all before. Oh, great. Another one of those know-your-rights guys. Look, buddy, you're not calling anyone until we figure out what's really going on here. Taylor, growing visibly uncomfortable, reached for his phone. Brad, maybe we should just check his ID in the database, before this gets worse. But Harper slapped a hand on Taylor's arm, stopping him mid-dial. Worse? What, you scared this guy's gonna cry to his fancy lawyer? Relax, we're doing our job. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He saw the hesitation in Taylor's posture and decided to push just a little harder. Officer Taylor, he said, addressing him directly, it's not too late to do the right thing here. One phone call and this mess can be cleaned up before it blows up in your faces. That earned a glare from Harper. You don't get to make demands, pal. You're in a cell. That means you're the one who's messed up, not us. Before Marcus could respond, the station door creaked open and in walked Captain Michelson. The man carried an air of authority that instantly changed the energy in the room. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, taking in Harper's self-satisfied smirk, Taylor's nervous fidgeting, and Marcus's silent, watchful presence. What's going on here? Michelson asked, his voice low and steady, but with an unmistakable undertone of, I don't have time for nonsense. Harper straightened up like a student caught out of uniform. Captain, we detained a suspicious individual loitering downtown. I've got everything under control. Michelson's gaze shifted to Marcus. His brows furrowed as he took in the suit, the calm posture, and the undeniable aura of someone who didn't belong here, at least not on that side of the bars. And you didn't run his ID? Michelson asked, his tone growing colder. Harper hesitated, his confidence faltering for the first time. Well, we were about to... Don't, Michelson interrupted, holding up a hand. He grabbed Marcus's ID from a nearby desk and studied it. The shift in his expression was subtle but telling, a tightening of the jaw, a slight widening of the eyes. Michelson turned back to Harper and Taylor, his voice now laced with barely concealed frustration. Are you kidding me? Do you two even know who you've got sitting in that cell? Taylor looked like he was bracing for impact. Harper, still clinging to his fragile ego, stammered, Michelson cut him off with a glare that could stop traffic. This man is the State Attorney General of Illinois. The room fell silent. For a moment, all you could hear was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Marcus leaned back against the cold wall of the cell, his lips curving into the slightest hint of a smile. Finally, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Someone with common sense. Harper's face turned a shade of pale that could rival the station walls. You didn't think, Michelson snapped. That's the problem. Both of you in my office, now. As the two officers slunk out of the room, Marcus stood, brushing non-existent dust off his suit. He locked eyes with Michelson, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable weight. I trust this misunderstanding will be resolved immediately. Michelson nodded stiffly. It will. And for what it's worth, I apologize. Marcus stepped out of the cell as the captain unlocked it, his composure intact but his mind already racing. This wasn't just a bad day, it was a headline waiting to happen, and Marcus knew exactly how to make sure it became one. The tension in the station could have shattered glass. Captain Michelson stared at Marcus's ID, his face cycling through disbelief and shock, and something dangerously close to panic. His lips moved silently as he reread the name. Is this some kind of joke? He murmured, his voice low as if hoping he'd misread. Harper, oblivious to the looming storm, stepped forward. "What's wrong, Captain? Something off with his—" Michelson cut him off, turning with the precision of a knife. His glare could have melted steel. "You just arrested the Attorney General of Illinois." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The fluorescent hum of the station lights, the shuffling papers, even the distant sounds of traffic outside, all of it faded into a suffocating silence. Harper's smirk dissolved so fast, it was like someone hit delete on his entire personality. His face drained of color, leaving him looking like a statue caught mid-blink. Taylor's throat bobbed as he swallowed, his hand tightening around the desk for support. Marcus finally stood, adjusting his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate motion. His voice, calm and unwavering, sliced through the room. "Now that we've cleared up who I am, I'd like to make my phone call." Michelson nodded, already fumbling with the keys to unlock the cell. "Of course, Mr. Lawson. My deepest apologies for this gross misunderstanding." Marcus stepped out, every inch of him exuding control. He walked toward the desk, but not before throwing a glance at Harper. "I'd recommend a refresher course on due process." But the story was far from over. Outside the station, a small crowd had gathered, their phones aimed at the building like paparazzi chasing a scandal. The earlier videos of the arrest had gone viral in record time. By now, Marcus's face and title were plastered across every major news outlet. Headlines like "Police Detain Illinois Attorney General in Case of Mistaken Identity" and "Viral Video Sparks Outrage Over Arrest of Top Legal Official" dominated the airwaves. Hours later, Harper and Taylor found themselves in the captain's office, sitting stiffly as Michelson loomed over them. The captain was holding a printed copy of one of the headlines, his jaw tight enough to crack a walnut. "Well?" Michelson demanded, slamming the paper onto his desk. "What do you have to say for yourselves?" Harper, his confidence now in tatters, stammered, I thought he looked suspicious. The watch, the suit, it didn't fit the scene." Michelson's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Oh, so now wearing a nice watch is a crime? Let me guess, next time it'll be for carrying a briefcase?" Taylor shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Harper, desperate to save face, added, I thought I was doing my job." Michelson leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You weren't doing your job. You were letting your ego do the talking. And now the station is the laughingstock of the entire country. Congratulations." Harper shrank back in his chair. Taylor opened his mouth as if to say something, but thought better of it. By the next morning, Marcus was back in his office, sipping coffee as his team updated him on the media storm. The video had sparked more than outrage. It had reignited debates about profiling, misuse of authority, and systemic bias. People were demanding answers, and Marcus intended to deliver them. "This isn't just about me," he told his team. "This is about the next person who doesn't have the title or the resources to fight back." He took to the podium later that day, addressing a packed press conference. Cameras flashed as he spoke, with the same composure he'd maintained throughout the ordeal. This incident highlights a larger issue within our system, one that cannot be ignored. It's not just about one officer's poor judgment. It's about ensuring accountability at every level. The room erupted into applause, but Marcus wasn't done. Behind the scenes, he began drafting proposals for sweeping police reform, using his own experience as a catalyst for change. Back at the station, Harper was reassigned to desk duty pending further investigation. Taylor, though spared from direct blame, had clearly learned a lesson of his own. Meanwhile, Captain Michelson implemented mandatory training sessions for all officers under his command, determined to prevent anything like this from happening again. As for Marcus, he had turned a moment of humiliation into a platform for change. He knew the battle was far from over, but if there was one thing he was good at, it was winning a fight that mattered, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever. What would you do in Marcus's place? Do you think he handled the situation the best way possible, or would you have approached it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something similar? Let us know, and don't forget to like this post if the story resonated with you. This story was created to raise awareness about important issues like profiling and systemic bias, aiming to shed light on these challenges and inspire change. Together, we can make the world a better, fairer place. Your opinion matters. Let's start the conversation.